Ambassador Kethvar stood on the crystal balcony of his tower home on Zephyr Prime and looked out at the glowing city below. The tall spires reached toward the purple sky like fingers made of light, and his people moved between them in flying vehicles that hummed softly through the air. This was the heart of the Zephyrian Empire that ruled 12 star systems and controlled the lives of billions across the galaxy. Tonight was special because Kethvar was hosting a dinner party for the most important people in the Empire: trade. Ministers and military generals floated around his dining hall, while servants with blue skin and 4 arms brought them exotic foods from distant worlds. The conversation was light, and everyone was in a good mood because the Empire was growing stronger every day. "Tell us about the new worlds," said Minister Velthara as she picked at a dish made from creatures that lived in the ice rings of a far planet. "I heard we found some amusing primitives in the Outer Rim." Kethvar's 4 eyes lit up with pleasure. This was his favorite topic because it always made everyone laugh. "Oh, yes. There is this delightful little planet called Earth, in a system they call Sol. The creatures there are so backward that they still fight wars over black liquid that comes from the ground." The dinner guests made clicking sounds with their mandibles, which was how Zephyrians laughed. General Korthmak leaned forward with interest because he loved hearing about primitive species. "Do they have space travel yet?" "Barely," Kethvar said with great amusement. "They can barely reach their own moon, and they think chemical rockets are advanced technology. But here is the best part. They actually believe they are alone in the universe. They send radio signals into space hoping someone will answer them." This brought even more clicking laughter from the group. Dr. Yethnal waved her tentacles in the air as she spoke. "How wonderfully naive. Do they know about the Empire at all?" "Nothing," Kethvar replied. "They are completely ignorant of galactic civilization. Some of them even think their planet is flat. Can you imagine such primitive thinking in this day and age?" Meanwhile, on Earth, in a place called Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado, Colonel Jake Morrison sat in a deep underground room filled with computers and screens that showed data from space. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes who had spent 30 years in the military and had seen many strange things in his career. But nothing had prepared him for what his team had discovered in the past 3 months. The room around him buzzed with activity as scientists and technicians worked at their stations. Screens showed radio waves and energy patterns from deep space, and Morrison studied each report with growing concern. Something was out there, and it was not natural. Lieutenant Katie Walsh walked over to his desk, carrying a tablet computer. She was young and smart and had joined the Space Force because she wanted to be part of something important. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a regulation style, and her blue eyes were bright with excitement mixed with worry. "Sir, we have more data from the arrays," she said as she handed him the tablet. "The signals are definitely getting stronger, and they are coming from multiple locations beyond our solar system." Morrison looked at the numbers and patterns on the screen. He had been in intelligence long enough to recognize when something big was happening. "What do our best linguists say about the content?" "That is the scary part, sir," Katie replied. "The computer programs have been working on translating the signals for weeks now, and they think they have broken some of the basic language patterns. These are not random messages or scientific broadcasts." Morrison felt a cold feeling in his stomach. "What kind of messages are they?" Katie touched the screen and brought up a new display. "They appear to be military communications, sir. References to something called fleet movements and resource allocation. And, sir, there is something else. The computers found repeated references To our solar system and specifically to Earth." The colonel stood up and walked to the big screen on the wall that showed a map of nearby star systems. Red dots marked the sources of the alien signals, and there were dozens of them in a rough circle around Earth's location. "Show me the translation of the most recent intercept." Katie touched her tablet, and words appeared on the big screen. Morrison read them slowly and felt his blood turn cold. The message talked about something called the Zephyrian Trade Expansion Initiative and listed Earth as a target for what they called resource optimization. Other phrases mentioned population relocation and atmospheric processing. "They are planning to invade us," Morrison said quietly. "These aliens, whoever they are, have been watching us and they think we are helpless." In another part of the mountain, Dr. Lisa Carter worked alone in her laboratory surrounded by equipment that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. She was a small woman with dark hair and intense brown eyes who had spent her whole career studying theoretical physics. Most people thought her work was impossible, but she had just proved them all wrong. The machine in front of her hummed with energy as it bent space and time in ways that should not have been possible. For 3 years, she had been working on quantum tunnel theory, and tonight she had finally made it work. The test particle had disappeared from one chamber and appeared instantly in another chamber, 3 rooms away without traveling through the space between them. "Faster than light travel," she whispered to herself with amazement. "We can actually do it." Her computer chimed with an incoming message from Colonel Morrison requesting her immediate presence in the command center. Lisa grabbed her notes and ran through the corridors of the underground base, wondering what could be so urgent. When she reached the command center, she found Morrison and his team staring at screens full of alien signals. "Dr. Carter, we need your quantum tunnel drive, and we need it now," Morrison said without any greeting. "These alien signals indicate that Earth is about to be invaded by something called the Zephyrian Empire." Lisa looked at the translated messages on the screens and felt her heart racing. "Colonel, my drive system just had its first successful test tonight. I do not even know if it will work on a larger scale or if it is safe for human travel." "How long would you need to build a working ship with your drive system?" Morrison asked. Lisa thought about the engineering challenges and the resources they would need. With unlimited funding and full military support, maybe 6 months to build a prototype ship. But, Colonel, we would be going into this completely blind. We do not know anything about these aliens or their technology. Morrison pointed at the screens showing the alien fleet positions. "Dr. Carter, according to these intercepts, we have maybe 8 months before they arrive. If your drive system works, we might have a chance to surprise them. If it does not work, then Earth falls without ever having a chance to fight back." Back on Zephyr Prime, the dinner party was winding down as the guests prepared to return to their homes. Ambassador Kethvar stood on his balcony again, looking up at the stars and thinking about all the primitive worlds that would soon belong to the Empire. Earth was just one of many targets, but it amused him because the humans were so completely unaware of their fate. "The humans will make excellent slaves once we relocate the ones we decide to keep," he said to Minister Velthara, who had stayed behind to discuss business. "Their primitive technology means they will not require much suppression." Velthara made agreeing sounds as she looked over reports on her data pad. "The resource surveys show good mineral deposits and adequate water supplies. We should be able to strip mine the useful materials within a decade and convert the atmosphere to something more suitable for our colonists." Neither of them knew that. At that very moment, human scientists were working around the clock to build weapons and ships that would change everything. The Zephyrians had made their first mistake by underestimating the species that had learned to split atoms before they learned to work together. Soon they would discover that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology, but their ability to adapt and fight when their survival was threatened. In 6 months, the first human starship would leave Earth's orbit and head directly toward Zephyr Prime. The empire that had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years was about to meet an enemy unlike any they had faced before. The age of Zephyrian dominance was coming to an end, and they did not even know it yet. Captain Zephlon stood on the command deck of his flagship and stared at the sensor readings with all 4 of his eyes. This could not be right because the intelligence reports had been very clear about the primitive nature of the humans on Earth. According to every survey, the creatures barely had chemical rockets, and certainly did not possess faster than light travel. Yet his sensors were detecting 3 large ships in orbit around the blue planet, and they were definitely not Zephyrian designs. "Run another scan," he ordered his sensor operator. "There must be some mistake in the readings." The young Zephyrian at the sensor station worked quickly with his 6-fingered hands dancing over the controls. "Sir, the readings are correct. 3 vessels approximately 800 meters in length are stationed in high orbit around the target planet. Energy. Signatures suggest advanced power systems and what appear to be weapon arrays." Zephlon felt his mandibles clicking with nervousness. In his 40 years of service to the Empire, he had never encountered a primitive species that possessed such technology. Could they have acquired ships from another civilization? "Unknown, sir," replied his science officer. "The hull compositions and energy patterns do not match any known galactic designs. These ships appear to be of completely original construction." Meanwhile, on the bridge of the UES Defiance, Admiral Rick Stone studied the approaching alien fleet through the main viewing screen. He was a weathered man in his 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. Behind him, his crew worked at their stations with calm efficiency that came from months of intensive training with equipment that had not existed a year ago. The 3 human ships hanging in Earth's orbit were marvels of engineering that combined Dr. Lisa Carter's quantum tunnel drive with weapons technology that had leaped forward by centuries in just months. The hulls were made of metal, alloys that had been developed in secret laboratories, while the power systems used controlled fusion reactions that could fuel a small city. "Communications Officer Torres report," Stone said without taking his eyes off the alien ships. Lieutenant Ben Torres was a young man from Texas who had joined the Space Force because he wanted to be part of humanity's first steps into space. He had never imagined that those steps would involve a war for survival. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the lead alien vessel. The universal translator is working on the language patterns." "Put it through," Stone ordered. The main screen flickered and suddenly showed the insect-like face of Captain Zephlon. The alien's compound eyes glittered in the light from his ship's bridge, while his mandibles moved as he spoke in a series of clicks and whistles that the computer translated into English. "Primitive creatures of the 3rd planet, you will immediately surrender your vessels and prepare for relocation processing. I am Captain Zephlon of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet, and this system is now under the authority of the Empire. Resistance will result in your immediate destruction." Stone looked around, his bridge at the faces of his crew. These were men and women who had volunteered to be humanity's first line of defense against an enemy they knew almost nothing about. They had trained with weapons they barely understood to fight a war that would determine whether their species survived or became slaves. "Open a return channel," Stone said calmly. Torres nodded and activated the communications array. "Channel open, sir." Stone stood up from his command chair and faced the alien captain on the screen. "This is Admiral Rick Stone of the United Earth Fleet. You have exactly 30 seconds to explain why you think you can waltz into our solar system and start making demands before my gunners test our new particle cannons on your ships. Pinos. Zephlon's mandibles clicked in what the computer identified as laughter. Particle cannons? Foolish creature, our shields can withstand the energy output of a small star. Your primitive weapons cannot penetrate Zephyrian defensive systems. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick. Stone felt a cold anger building in his chest. These aliens had come to his home system planning to kill or enslave every human being alive, and they thought it would be easy. Mr. Torres, signal the retribution and the vengeance. All ships prepare to engage. Sir, weapons are charged and ready, reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Chris Baker. Fire, Stone said simply. The UES Defiance's main battery consisted of 4 massive particle cannons that focused antimatter energy into beams of pure destruction. When they fired, the space around the ship lit up with brilliant white light as concentrated energy streaked toward the Zephyrian flagship at nearly the speed of light. Captain Zephlon watched the human weapons fire with amusement that quickly turned to horror. The primitive particle beams struck his ship's shields, and instead of being harmlessly absorbed, they punched through the defensive barrier like it was made of paper. The beams continued through the ship's hull, cutting through armor and structure until they reached the command tower. Zephlon had just enough time to realize that the humans were not as primitive as the Empire had believed before the antimatter beam vaporized him and the entire forward section of his flagship. On the bridge of the UES Retribution, Captain Amanda Cross watched the alien command ship break apart in a ball of fire and debris. She was a career Navy officer who had transferred to the Space Force when humanity learned they were not alone in the universe. Her dark hair was streaked with gray, and her green eyes held the steady gaze of someone who had commanded ships in dangerous waters. "Ma'am, the alien formation is scattering," reported her tactical officer. "Enemy vessels are attempting to retreat." Cross studied the tactical display that showed 12 Zephyrian ships trying to escape toward the edge of the solar system. "Negative. These things came here to wipe us out. If we let even one escape, they will bring back reinforcements with better intelligence about our capabilities." "All ships' weapons free," she ordered over the fleet communications channel. "Pursue and destroy. We send a message today that humanity is not prey." The 3 human ships spread out and began hunting down the fleeing aliens. The Zephyrians had superior numbers, and their ships were larger, but they had made a fatal mistake in underestimating human technology. Dr. Carter's quantum tunnel drives allowed the human ships to make short, faster-than-light jumps that let them appear behind escaping enemies while the antimatter weapons cut through alien hulls like knives through butter. Lieutenant Katie Walsh sat at her communications station on the UES Vengeance and listened to the panicked alien transmissions as the Zephyrian fleet was systematically destroyed. The universal translator was working better now, and she could understand most of what the aliens were saying to each other. "They are calling for emergency reinforcements," she reported to her captain. "They keep saying that human technology is impossible and requesting immediate evacuation." Captain Sandra Kim was a former fighter pilot who had been selected to command one of humanity's first starships because of her experience with experimental aircraft. "How many alien ships are left?" "3, sir," reported the tactical officer. 2 cruisers and what appears to be a scout vessel." Kim studied the display showing the positions of the remaining enemy ships. The scout vessel was smaller and faster than the others, and was already approaching the edge of the solar system where it could escape to faster than light speed. "Target the scout ship first. We cannot let it carry word back to the Empire about our real capabilities." The UES Vengeance made a short quantum tunnel jump that brought it directly into the path of the fleeing scout ship. At point-blank range, the human ship's weapons reduced the alien vessel to glowing wreckage in seconds. The two remaining cruisers surrendered immediately rather than face the same fate. Admiral Stone stood on his bridge looking at the debris field that had been a Zephyrian invasion fleet just hours before. 12 enemy ships had entered the solar system planning to conquer Earth, and only 2 had survived to become prisoners. It was humanity's first victory in what would certainly be a larger war. "Damage report," he ordered. "Minor hull scoring on the Retribution, sir," Torres reported. "No casualties and all systems operational." Stone nodded and looked at the tactical display showing the positions of his 3 ships. In 6 months, humanity had gone from having no knowledge of alien life to building a fleet capable of defeating advanced alien warships. It was an achievement that should have been impossible, but humans had always been good at doing impossible things when their survival was threatened. "Signal Earth Command," Stone ordered. "Tell them that first contact has been established and the alien advance force has been neutralized. But also tell them that this is just the beginning. The Empire will send more ships and they will not underestimate us a second time." The bridge crew worked quietly as they prepared reports and assessed the battle damage. Everyone knew that they had won the first round, but the real war was just starting. Somewhere in the depths of space, the Zephyrian Empire was learning that the primitive humans were not as helpless as they had believed. Stone looked out at the stars and wondered how many enemy ships were already heading toward Earth. The Empire had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years, and they would not give up easily. But humanity had advantages that the aliens did not understand, including the willingness to fight for their freedom, no matter what the cost. The crystal spires of Zephyr Prime trembled as Emperor Nethgul's psychic rage filled the throne room. His massive form sat on a chair made from the bones of extinct species, while his 4 eyes glowed with fury that made the air itself seem to burn. Around him, the highest officials of the Empire cowered as they delivered news that should have been impossible. "Repeat what you just told me," the Emperor commanded, in a voice that echoed inside the minds of everyone present. General Korthmak stood at attention, despite the terror he felt radiating from his ruler. His cybernetic implants glowed red as they processed tactical data and tried to make sense of the impossible reports from the Sol system. "My lord, the advance fleet under B. Captain Zephlon has been completely destroyed. Only 2 ships escaped, and they report that human technology far exceeds our intelligence estimates." "Humans," the Emperor spat with disgust. "Primitive creatures who fight with chemical explosives and still believe they are alone in the universe. How could they possibly destroy an Imperial battle group?" Chief Science Advisor Dr. Yethnal's tentacles writhed nervously as she consulted her data tablets. "The weapon signatures are completely unknown, my lord. These are not stolen Zephyrian designs or any technology in our databases. The humans appear to have developed antimatter focusing systems and some form of micro-faster-than-light drive that allows their ships to make tactical jumps." Trade Minister Velthara stepped forward with her own report clutched in her 6-fingered hands. "My lord, we have also lost contact with the Proxima Centauri colony. Long-range sensors detect massive energy discharges consistent with orbital bombardment. We believe the humans have launched a counterattack." The Emperor's psychic aura flared with such intensity that several minor officials collapsed to the floor. In his 1,000 years of rule, no primitive species had ever dared to strike back at the Empire. Lesser civilizations begged for mercy or died quietly when the Imperial fleets arrived. They did not build weapons capable of destroying Zephyrian warships. "Gather the War Council," Nethgul commanded. "If these humans want to fight, then they will face the full might of the Empire. I want 3 fleets assembled and sent to their home system immediately." Meanwhile, on Earth, President Helen Martinez stood before an emergency session of Congress as news reports from around the world showed the reaction to humanity's first contact with alien life. The revelation that Earth was under attack by a galactic empire had caused panic in some places and grim determination in others. But everywhere people were asking the same question about whether humanity could survive against an enemy with superior technology and thousands of years of experience. "My fellow Americans and citizens of the world," Martinez began as her voice was broadcast to every corner of the globe, "we have learned that we are not alone in the universe and that we face an enemy that views us as nothing more than animals to be enslaved or exterminated." Behind her large screens showed images from the Proxima Centauri colony that had been humanity's first attempt at interstellar expansion. The small settlement of 50,000 people had been established just 3 years earlier using the first generation of Dr. Carter's quantum tunnel drives. Now it was nothing but radioactive ash floating in space. The aliens call themselves the Zephyrian Empire, and they have ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years through fear and oppression, Martinez continued. They came to our solar system expecting to find helpless primitives who would submit without resistance. Instead, they found something they did not expect. They found humanity. In the underground command center at Cheyenne Mountain, Colonel Jake Morrison watched the president's speech while coordinating the largest military buildup in human history. Shipyards in orbit around Earth worked around the clock-building vessels. That combined human engineering with technology that had advanced by centuries in just months. The quantum tunnel drives that Dr. Carter had perfected allowed ships to make short, faster-than-light jumps, while antimatter weapons gave them firepower that could challenge the most advanced alien designs. "Status report," Morrison asked as he walked between stations filled with technicians and military officers. Lieutenant Katie Walsh looked up from her communications console where she was coordinating with human colonies throughout the solar system. "Sir, we have 67 ships of the line completed with another 40 under construction. All vessels are equipped with quantum tunnel drives and full antimatter weapon suites." Morrison nodded as he studied the tactical displays showing ship positions throughout the solar system. The human fleet was smaller than what the Empire could field, but it had advantages that the aliens did not understand. Human ships could appear anywhere on a battlefield without warning, while their weapons could punch through shields that had protected Zephyrian vessels for centuries. "What about our intelligence gathering?" Morrison asked. Katie touched her screen and brought up new data. "We have been monitoring Zephyrian communications, and we know they are assembling a massive revenge fleet. Best estimates suggest 300 warships under the command of General Korthmak himself." The colonel felt his stomach tighten at those numbers. 300 ships against 67 was not good odds, even with superior technology. "When do we expect them to arrive?" "Based on their transmission patterns and what we know about their faster-than-light capabilities, approximately 6 weeks, sir." Morrison walked to the main display screen that showed a map of nearby star systems, with red indicators marking known Zephyrian positions. The Empire controlled vast territories and had resources that humanity could barely imagine. Even If the human fleet won the coming battle, there would always be more enemy ships and more enemy worlds ready to continue the fight. "Get me Admiral Clark," Morrison ordered. Admiral Ryan Clark appeared on the communication screen from his flagship, the UES Vengeance, where he was overseeing final preparations for the defense of Earth. He was a career naval officer who had transferred to the Space Force when humanity learned about the alien threat. His weathered face showed the strain of preparing for a battle that would determine the survival of his species. "Admiral, we have confirmation that the Empire is sending approximately 300 ships against us," Morrison reported. "They will be under the command of General Korthmak, who is considered one of their best military leaders." Clark nodded grimly as he looked at tactical data on his own screens. "We expected heavy retaliation after destroying their advance fleet. Have our intelligence sources provided any information about Zephyrian battle tactics?" "Some," Morrison replied. "They rely heavily on overwhelming firepower and coordinated fleet movements. They are not used to fighting enemies who can match their technology or use unconventional tactics." "Good," Clark said with satisfaction, "because we have no intention of fighting them conventionally. Dr. Carter's quantum tunnel drives give us mobility advantages that no military force in the galaxy has ever possessed. We are going to use that advantage to tear their fleet apart piece by piece." In the research laboratories beneath the lunar surface, Dr. Lisa Carter worked with teams of scientists and engineers to push human technology even further beyond what should have been possible. Her quantum tunnel theory had already revolutionized space travel and weapons technology, but she knew that humanity would need every advantage it could get against an empire that had conquered the galaxy. "The micro-jump calculations are complete," she reported to her assistant, Dr. Ben Torres. "We can now achieve tunnel jumps as short as 2 seconds with pinpoint accuracy. That means our ships can literally appear inside enemy formations and disappear again before the aliens can react." Torres looked at the test results with amazement. "Dr. Carter, this technology is beyond anything the Zephyrians have ever encountered. Their entire military doctrine is based on traditional space combat with predictable movement patterns." Carter nodded as she watched technicians install the latest tunnel drive systems into newly completed warships. "The Empire has ruled through superior technology for 1,000 years. They have never faced an enemy that could innovate faster than they could adapt. That is going to be their downfall." Back on Zephyr Prime, General Korthmak stood in the Imperial War Room studying holographic displays that showed the positions of his assembled fleets. 300 of the Empire's most advanced warships had been gathered from across the galaxy and placed under his command. It was the largest military force assembled since the conquest of the Altarian Republic 2 centuries earlier. "The human home system will be completely sterilized," he told his assembled officers. "We will leave nothing alive and turn their planets into monuments to the price of defying the Empire." His tactical officers clicked their mandibles in agreement as they reviewed attack plans that called for the systematic destruction of every human world and space station. The Empire's standard doctrine for dealing with rebellious species was total extinction, and they saw no reason to make an exception for the humans. "What about their technological capabilities?" asked Fleet Admiral Yethlon. The survivors from the advance fleet reported weapons and defensive systems that exceeded our own. Korthmak's cybernetic implants flared with confidence as he dismissed the concerns. "Impossible." The Battle of Luna began at exactly 3:47 in the morning Earth Standard Time, when the largest fleet in Zephyrian history dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. General Korthmak stood on the bridge of his massive flagship, the Eternal Conquest, and watched his tactical displays show 300 Imperial warships spreading into attack formation. Each vessel was the size of a small city and carried enough firepower to sterilize a planet. "Begin long-range sensor sweeps," Korthmak ordered his sensor operators. "I want to know the exact position and capabilities of every human vessel in this system." The data that came back made the general's mandibles click with satisfaction. The humans had assembled 67 ships behind Earth's moon in what appeared to be a desperate defensive formation. Against his 300 battle-tested warships, it would be a massacre that would serve as an example to any other species that might consider defying the Empire. "Signal all fleet commanders," Korthmak commanded. "We will advance in standard Imperial formation and crush the human fleet with overwhelming firepower. When their ships are destroyed, we will proceed to bombardment positions and sterilize every world in this system." Meanwhile, on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, Admiral Ryan Clark studied his own tactical displays and smiled grimly at what he saw. The Zephyrian fleet was massive and powerful, but they were fighting the last war while humanity was about to introduce them to an entirely new kind of warfare. "All ships execute Formation Thunder," Clark ordered over the fleet communications channel. "Let's show these aliens how humans really fight." To the Zephyrian sensors, it looked like the human fleet had panicked and scattered. Individual ships broke away from the main formation and fled in different directions, as if their crews had lost their nerve in the face of the overwhelming Imperial armada. General Korthmak watched the tactical display with satisfaction as his forces spread out to pursue the fleeing humans. "Just as expected," he told his tactical officers. "These primitives have no understanding of coordinated fleet action. Break formation and pursue individual targets. We will hunt them down one by one." That was exactly what Admiral Clark had been hoping the alien commander would do. The moment the Zephyrian fleet broke its disciplined formation to chase scattered human ships, the real battle began. Captain Sandra Kim commanded the destroyer UES Lightning, and she waited until a Zephyrian cruiser had isolated itself from the main enemy formation before activating her ship's secret weapon. "Quantum tunnel. Drive online," she reported to her crew, initiating micro-jump sequence. The Lightning vanished from normal space for exactly 2.3 seconds before reappearing directly behind the alien cruiser at point-blank range. At that distance, her antimatter cannons carved through the enemy ship's armor like a laser, through tissue paper. Before the Zephyrian crew could even realize they were under attack, their ship was breaking apart in a ball of fire. "Tunnel jump complete," Kim reported as her ship disappeared again and materialized behind a second enemy vessel. "Target destroyed. Moving to next objective." All across the battlefield, human ships began appearing and disappearing like ghosts, as they used their quantum tunnel drives to strike without warning. The Zephyrian formation dissolved into chaos as commanders tried to track enemies that could literally teleport from one location to another. "This is impossible!" General Korthmak raged as his flagship shuddered under human weapons fire. "No species has ever developed micro-tunnel technology. Our scientists said it was theoretically impossible." His science officer, Dr. Veltara, worked frantically at her instruments, trying to understand how the humans were achieving such precise spatial manipulation. "General, the energy signatures suggest they are actually folding space-time on a tactical level. The power requirements should be enormous, but somehow they have managed to miniaturize the technology." Colonel Marcus Shaw piloted the experimental fighter UES Wasp through the chaos of the space battle, dodging alien weapons fire as he searched for high-value targets. His ship was one of the smallest in the human fleet, but it was also one of the most dangerous because its quantum tunnel drive could take it places that larger vessels could not go. "I have a clear shot at the enemy flagship," Shaw reported over the communications channel, "requesting permission to attempt penetration of their hangar bay." "Negative, Wasp," came Admiral Clark's voice. "That ship is too heavily defended for a single fighter." Shaw looked at his tactical display and saw an opportunity that would only last for a few seconds. "Sir, I can quantum jump directly into their hangar bay and deploy a full spread of antimatter torpedoes before they know I am there." "Do it," Clark ordered. "But get out fast. We need every pilot we have." Shaw activated his tunnel drive and felt the familiar sensation of space folding around his fighter. For a moment he existed in the strange gray dimension between normal space and hyperspace, where time had no meaning. Then reality snapped back into focus, and he found himself inside the hangar bay of the Zephyrian flagship, surrounded by alien fighters and support craft. "Welcome to human ingenuity," Shaw muttered as he launched every torpedo his fighter carried and activated his tunnel drive again. The antimatter warheads detonated inside the flagship's hangar bay, creating a chain reaction that tore through multiple decks and left the massive ship crippled and burning. Shaw's fighter materialized back in open space just as the alien vessel's defensive systems finally reacted to his presence. General Korthmak felt his ship lurching under the internal explosions and realized that the humans had somehow managed to attack him from inside his own defenses. His tactical display showed that nearly half of his fleet had been destroyed or damaged in the first hour of combat, while the human losses were minimal. "All ships retreat to Rally Point Beta," he ordered, with growing desperation. "We need to regroup and develop new tactics to counter their teleportation technology." But Admiral Clark had no intention of letting the Zephyrian fleet escape to fight another day. "All ships pursue and engage," he ordered. "Do not let any enemy vessel reach the edge of the system." The battle raged for 6 more hours as human ships used their mobility advantage to hunt down fleeing aliens throughout the solar system. Quantum tunnel drives allowed the smaller human fleet to be everywhere at once, while antimatter weapons cut through even the heaviest Zephyrian armor. Captain Amanda Cross commanded the UES Retribution, and she found herself in pursuit of 3 enemy cruisers that were trying to reach hyperspace. "Engineering, give me everything we have," she ordered. "I need one more tunnel jump to get in front of those ships." "Drives are overheating, Captain," reported her chief engineer. "One more. Jump might cause a containment failure." Cross looked at her tactical display and saw that the alien ships were just minutes away from escaping to hyperspace, where they could carry word of human capabilities back to the Empire. "Do it anyway. We cannot let them get away." The Retribution made one final quantum jump that brought it directly into the path of the fleeing cruisers. At close range, the human ship's weapons reduced all 3 enemy vessels to glowing debris before they could send a single transmission back to Zephyrian space. When the battle finally ended, the debris field around Luna stretched for thousands of kilometers. Of the 300 ships that General Korthmak had brought to destroy humanity, only 12 managed to escape back to hyperspace. The Zephyrian fleet that was supposed to demonstrate Imperial might had been shattered by a force 1/5 its size. Admiral Clark stood on his bridge looking out at the wreckage of enemy ships and the few human vessels that had been damaged in the fighting. His fleet had achieved the impossible by defeating a vastly superior force through superior tactics and technology that the enemy could not counter. Damage report, he ordered. 4 ships with minor damage, sir, reported his communications officer. No casualties and all vessels remain operational. Clark nodded and looked at the tactical display showing the positions of his surviving ships. The human fleet had proven that it could defend Earth against even massive Imperial attacks, but this victory would bring consequences that none of them could fully predict. Signal Earth Command, Clark ordered. Tell them that the Zephyrian Revenge Fleet has been destroyed, and the immediate threat to Earth has been neutralized. But also tell them that this battle will not go unnoticed by the Empire. They will send everything they have against us now. Lieutenant Katie Walsh worked at her communications station intercepting the transmissions from the 12 surviving Zephyrian ships as they fled toward the edge of the solar system. The universal translator was working perfectly now, and she could understand every word of the panicked reports the aliens were sending back to their homeworlds. "Sir, they are calling this defeat impossible," she reported. "The surviving commanders are reporting that human technology exceeds anything in the Imperial databases and requesting immediate reinforcement by the entire Imperial Navy." Clark felt a cold certainty settle in his stomach. The Empire had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years, and they would not accept 2 crushing defeats without responding with everything they had. The next attack would not be 300 ships, but 3,000 or even more. "Helm set course for the edge of the system," Clark ordered. The crystal spires of Zephyr Prime had stood for 10,000 years as symbols of imperial power that stretched across the galaxy, but they had never been built to withstand an attack from an enemy capable of appearing anywhere without warning. Emperor Nethgul sat on his throne of bone and watched through the palace windows as human ships materialized in low orbit above his capital city like vengeful spirits come to collect a debt. "This cannot be happening," the Emperor whispered as his psychic aura flickered with disbelief and growing terror. "No primitive species has ever dared to attack the homeworld of the Empire." Admiral Rick Stone stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and looked down at the glowing cities that covered the surface of Zephyr Prime. After 2 crushing defeats, the Zephyrian military had finally learned to respect human capabilities, but it was too late to save their empire from the consequences of their arrogance. "Open a channel to the planetary government," Stone ordered his communications officer. "It's time to discuss terms." The main screen flickered to life, showing the throne room of the Imperial Palace, where Emperor Nethgul sat surrounded by his terrified advisors. The alien ruler's 4 eyes glowed with rage, but Stone could see the fear beneath the bluster. "I am Admiral Rick Stone of the United Earth Fleet," Stone began in a calm voice that carried the weight of absolute authority. "I am here to discuss the surrender of the Zephyrian Empire and the terms for ending this war." The Emperor's psychic voice echoed through the communication channel, carrying waves of fury that made the human crew wince. "Surrender? You dare speak of surrender to the masters of the galaxy? The Empire has ruled for 1,000 years and will rule for 1,000 more." "Former masters," Stone corrected with cold precision. "Your fleets are scrap metal floating in space. Your colonies are surrendering faster than we can accept their capitulation. Right now, I have enough firepower in orbit to turn this planet into molten rock, and there is nothing you can do to stop me." In the throne room, Trade Minister Velthara trembled as she realized how completely everything had changed. Just months ago, she had casually authorized the destruction of Earth as part of a routine expansion operation. Now, the primitive humans she had dismissed so easily held the power of life and death over the capital world of the Empire. "What do you want?" the Emperor asked in a voice that had lost its commanding tone. Stone looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew who had fought impossible battles to bring humanity to this moment. The immediate dissolution of the Zephyrian Empire and independence for all subject species, war crimes trials for those responsible for genocide and slavery, and most importantly, a guarantee that no imperial force will ever again threaten human space. Chief Science Advisor Dr. Yethnal's tentacles writhed with confusion as she tried to understand how the humans had achieved such complete victory. How? She asked through the communication channel. How did a primitive species develop technology superior to an empire that has conquered the galaxy? Admiral Stone smiled grimly as he remembered the desperate months when humanity had raced to develop weapons capable of defending their home world. Dr. Carter, would you care to explain to our hosts how we managed the impossible? Dr. Lisa Carter stepped into view of the communication pickup wearing the simple laboratory clothes she preferred over formal uniforms. It is actually quite simple, she said to the assembled alien leaders. Your empire became so confident in its superiority that you stopped innovating. You conquered through superior technology 1,000 years ago and then spent the next millennium believing that nothing could challenge you. She paused to let that sink in before continuing. Humanity, on the other hand, has spent its entire existence fighting for survival against impossible odds. When you threatened our world, we did not surrender or beg for mercy. We adapted. We innovated. We developed quantum tunnel drives and antimatter weapons and tactical systems that your scientists said were impossible. Emperor Nethgul's voice carried bewilderment along with his rage. But the energy requirements for microtunnel technology should be enormous. How did you miniaturize the power systems? Dr. Carter smiled with the satisfaction of a teacher explaining a difficult concept to a slow student. Controlled fusion reactions coupled with quantum field manipulation. The mathematics are actually quite elegant once you abandon the assumption that certain things are impossible. President Helen Martinez appeared on a secondary communication channel broadcasting from Earth. Her voice carried to every world in the former Zephyrian Empire as she addressed not just the Emperor, but all the species that had lived under imperial rule for generations. To the people of the galaxy who have suffered under Zephyrian oppression, Martinez began. Today marks the beginning of a new age. The empire that ruled through fear and violence has fallen. In its place, we offer something that has never existed. In galactic civilization, true democracy based on cooperation rather than conquest. On worlds throughout the former empire, alien species that had been enslaved for centuries began to understand that their long nightmare was finally over. The Altarian survivors, who had hidden in refugee camps for 200 years, emerged to reclaim their homeworlds. The Vegan colonies that had been stripped of their resources began planning to rebuild their shattered civilization. Ambassador Jake Morrison, who had once been Colonel Morrison, stood in the newly constructed United Worlds Council building on the neutral planet of Haven that had been chosen as the capital for the new galactic government. Around him, representatives from dozens of species worked together to draft a constitution that would guarantee the rights of all sentient beings. It is hard to believe that this all started with us being considered a joke, Morrison said to Dr. Carter, who now served as Director of Interspecies Technology Exchange. Carter looked out through the viewing windows at ships from 100 worlds coming and going in peaceful commerce. Perhaps we were the punchline, she replied, but we definitely got the last laugh. The terms that Admiral Stone had presented to Emperor Nethgul were surprisingly merciful by the standards of galactic warfare. Rather than demanding total destruction, Of the Zephyrian species, humanity offered a chance for redemption. War criminals would face trial, but ordinary citizens would be allowed to rebuild their society under the guidance of the new Democratic Council. Why? The Emperor had asked during the final surrender ceremony. Why show mercy to those who would have enslaved or destroyed you? President Martinez had answered with words that would be remembered throughout galactic history. Because strength without compassion is just tyranny. Humanity has had enough of tyrants, whether they come from Earth or from the stars. 6 months after the fall of the Empire, Dr. Carter stood in her new laboratory on Haven, watching young Zephyrian scientists work alongside human engineers on projects that would benefit all species. The quantum tunnel technology that had won. The war was now being used to establish instant communication networks between distant worlds, while antimatter power systems provided clean energy to planets that had been strip-mined by Imperial forces. The irony is remarkable, she told her research assistant, Dr. Ben Torres. The Empire's greatest weakness was their belief in their own superiority. They never imagined that a species they considered primitive could teach them anything. Torres nodded as he watched a group of former Imperial engineers learning human manufacturing techniques. What do you think would have happened if they had approached us as equals instead of conquerors? Carter smiled as she considered the possibilities. We probably would have shared our technology freely and worked together to explore the galaxy. Instead, they chose war and discovered that humanity fights best when our survival is threatened. In the months that followed, the galaxy learned what it meant to coexist with a species that combined advanced technology with democratic ideals. Human agricultural techniques ended famine on dozens of worlds, while medical advances extended the lifespans of species that had been dying from imperial neglect. Most importantly, the stubborn human insistence on treating even former enemies with dignity began to transform galactic civilization. The Zephyrian Empire had lasted 1,000 years by crushing anyone who opposed them, but their reign had been built on fear rather than genuine strength. Humanity's influence would endure far longer, not because of superior weapons, but because they had proven that different species could work together for the common good. On Earth, in a small museum dedicated to first contact, a simple plaque bore the words that had become humanity's unofficial motto among the stars. Never underestimate the species that learn to split atoms before they learn to split their differences. Emperor Nethgul now lived in comfortable exile on a peaceful agricultural world where he spent his days writing memoirs that tried to explain how the mightiest empire in galactic history had been brought down by the species they had dismissed as primitive jokes. His writings would become required reading in the schools of the new Democratic Council as an example of how arrogance and contempt for others could lead to the downfall of even the most powerful civilizations. The galaxy had learned that true strength came not from the ability to destroy enemies, but from the wisdom to turn enemies into allies.